Alex Whitmore was the kind of guy who would rather explain the tax code to a toddler than deal with any situation involving emotional intimacy. He worked as a middle manager at the Galactic Cultural Exchange Bureau, which, contrary to what it sounds like, wasn't a place where aliens and humans swapped recipes for pasta. It was an office designed to help Earthlings interact with extraterrestrial species in ways that didn't end with one of them blowing up the planet, or, worse, sending out a mass email that couldn't be unsent. The Bureau's official mission: to foster peaceful and productive relations between intergalactic cultures through communication, empathy, and shared understanding. The reality? It was a hot mess of convoluted paperwork, awkward conversations with beings whose only common language was telepathic nonsense, and enough uncomfortable situations to make you want to join the next UFO and head for the stars. This morning, however, was different. Alex had been summoned to a last-minute meeting, and the moment he stepped into the sterile, fluorescent-lit conference room, he knew something was up. The air smelled like stale coffee and misplaced optimism. Janet, his boss, was waiting for him at the long glass table. Her blonde hair was tied up in a perfect bun, her glasses perched on her nose, and her smile was the kind of corporate cheerfulness that made Alex want to slam his head into the nearest wall. "Good morning, Alex." Janet greeted him with an enthusiasm that suggested she'd had 3 espressos before he even walked in. "We have an exciting opportunity for you today." Alex gave her his best, "I don't believe a word you're saying" look and flopped into the chair across from her. "Exciting opportunity? Last time you said that, I had to translate a Zog's love poem to a Zog, who, by the way, had no idea what a poem was." Janet waved her hand dismissively, her smile unwavering. "This is different. You've been chosen to participate in a very important cultural exchange. It's an honor, really. You're going to be part of a mating ritual." Alex blinked. "Wait, what? You'll be participating in the Zifo mating ritual?" Janet said it as though she were announcing a new coffee machine in the break room. Alex sat up straighter. "I'm sorry, did you say mating ritual? Like, mating? Janet's smile didn't falter. "Yes, exactly. It's an essential part of their culture. You'll be acting as an intermediary between the Zifo ambassador, Zyra, and our government. It's a great opportunity for intergalactic diplomacy." Alex wasn't sure if he was more confused or horrified. "So, I have to have sex with an alien? Well..." Janet hesitated, clearly trying to find the least embarrassing way to phrase it. "Not exactly. The Zifo are a species that communicates through deep emotional connections. Mating is their way of sharing these bonds. It's not physical, not in the way you're thinking." Alex blinked. "So I'm not doing it? I'm just connecting emotionally?" "Yes, exactly. It's all about empathy, mental synchronization, and, well, emotional bonding." Janet leaned forward, her voice lowering conspiratorially. "Think of it like therapy. But more intimate. And, less talky." "Great," Alex muttered, sinking back in his chair. "I'm about to undergo some alien emotional therapy. Where do I sign up?" Janet handed him a thick packet of forms. "You'll need to sign these consent forms, of course. Standard procedure. But we're all very excited about your participation, Alex. This is going to be huge for the Bureau. I know it'll be life-changing for you." "Life-changing," Alex repeated flatly. "Like when I had to attend the Gorbak Peace Summit and ended up sitting in a room full of sentient lizards discussing their favorite kinds of moss for 2 hours." Yeah, that was life-changing. Janet clapped her hands together, clearly pleased by her own enthusiasm. It's going to be wonderful, I promise. Now, you'll meet Zyra in person tomorrow. I know you'll do great. You have such a unique skill set. Alex didn't feel any better. In fact, he felt about as good as a guy walking into a room filled with therapy couch aliens, each one more eager than the last to see him emotionally exposed. Well, as long as I don't have to get naked, or, explain my feelings. Janet's smile widened. Oh, don't worry. That won't be necessary. She was lying, but Alex didn't have the heart to point it out. The next day, Alex was nervously adjusting his tie in front of the mirror. He had been told the Zifo ambassador, Zyra, would be waiting for him in the official meeting room. Zyra, apparently, had already completed a dozen mating rituals with other species, making her an expert in emotional vulnerability and mental connection, or, as Alex liked to think of it, feeling things that aren't real. When he walked into the meeting room, Zyra was waiting for him. She was, to put it mildly, not what Alex had expected. Zyra was tall and shimmering, her skin glowing faintly in the dim light of the room. She had 3 eyes, each one a different shade of lavender, and her body seemed to ripple like water as if her form couldn't quite decide if it wanted to be solid or liquid. "Hello, Alex Whitmore," Zyra said, her voice like a soft hum, not quite spoken but somehow heard in his mind. It was disorienting, like having a thought intrude on his own. Hey, Zyra." He cleared his throat. "I mean, hi. Do you want to sit down or something? Is there a protocol for this?" Zyra tilted her head, as though considering his question. "No need for sitting. We will stand, connect. This is the beginning of our ritual." Alex's stomach did a somersault. "Great," he muttered under his breath. "No chairs, just emotional nudity." "Perfect." Zyra smiled. Well, Alex assumed it was a smile, given that the whole concept of a smile didn't quite apply to beings with 3 eyes and no visible mouth. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice warm and calm. That he wasn't ready. Not in the slightest. But, well, it was too late for that now. Janet would have my head if I bailed, Alex thought. "Sure, let's do this," he said, trying to keep his voice from cracking. They stood facing each other, awkwardly, like 2 teenagers at prom who didn't know what to do with their hands. Zyra raised one of her long, translucent arms toward him. "I will link our minds," she said. "In doing so, we will share our histories, our emotions. We will understand each other." Okay, Alex said. He was suddenly very aware of how sweaty his palms were. Zyra extended her hand, and Alex hesitated for just a moment before placing his own hand in hers. The moment their skin touched, a flood of images, emotions, and sensations overwhelmed him. It was as though his brain had been plugged into a high-speed data stream, except instead of facts and figures, he was receiving raw, unfiltered feelings. Memories of Zyra's life played out in his mind. He saw her as a child, alone in the vast expanse of her home planet, trying to communicate with beings who could not understand her. Her loneliness was almost palpable. Then, there were flashes of her time as a diplomat, experiencing moments of connection with other species, but never quite feeling. Seen. The emotional weight hit him harder than he expected. He stumbled back, breaking the connection. Whoa, that was intense. Zyra tilted her head again, her lavender eyes studying him. It was just a beginning. There is more to share, if you are willing. I think I need a moment, Alex said, trying to catch his breath. This was way more than he had signed up for, but as he stood there, struggling to regain his composure, something unexpected began to happen. A strange sense of empathy crept over him. He felt for Zyra. He understood the loneliness she had carried for so long. And in some weird, twisted way, he began to understand the power of this ritual, not just for the Ziffo, but for him as well. Maybe he needed to connect too. Alex took a deep breath and wiped his forehead. It wasn't like he'd expected the ritual to be a walk in the park, but he'd also assumed there'd be some kind of protocol, something that would tell him exactly what he was supposed to do next, or at least give him a few minutes to process everything that had just happened. Instead, he was standing there in front of an alien with 3 eyes, a body that shimmered like it was made of liquid light, and a mind that had just forced its way into his consciousness like an emotional tidal wave. I wasn't ready for that, Alex said, his voice a little shaky. He couldn't tell if Zyra was confused by his reaction or if she was just being polite by not commenting. It is not uncommon for humans to feel overwhelmed at first, Zyra responded, her voice still that smooth hum in his mind, like a quiet wave breaking over him. The link is strong. It requires an openness, a willingness to trust. But you did not pull away. That is good. Yeah, I guess. Alex scratched the back of his neck, trying to make sense of the chaotic swirl of images and emotions still floating in his head. So, what happens now? Do we keep going? I mean, I didn't exactly sign up for a deep dive into your life story. Zyra seemed unbothered by his flippant tone, her translucent form rippling as she adjusted her stance. We will continue, but not in the way you may think. The ritual is not just about understanding my history. It is about experiencing one another. Our worlds, our emotions, they will intersect. You will feel my feelings, and I will feel yours. We will become connected. Her 3 eyes blinked slowly, as if to emphasize the importance of what she was saying. Alex's stomach did another flip. That sounds intimate. Zyra didn't seem to understand the nuance in his voice, or maybe she just didn't care. Yes. It is a form of connection more profound than words. A way to know another without the need for language. His thoughts were still a little scattered. A moment ago, he'd felt like he was on the verge of some kind of breakthrough, but now it all just seemed so overwhelming. It wasn't that he was afraid of vulnerability, it was more that he didn't know how to trust that this kind of emotional experience could be real. Sure, the Ziffo were ancient and wiser than human history could even dream of, but all Alex could think of was that one time in therapy when he'd been asked to talk about his feelings, and it had felt like pulling teeth. How could a ritual with an alien be any different, but here he was, being asked to open up in ways he didn't even fully understand. And the weird thing? Part of him wanted to, fine, he said, taking a deep breath. Let's do this. I'll let you in. But no funny business, all right? No mind meld freakouts or whatever. Zyra tilted her head again, that enigmatic smile, or whatever passed for one on her alien face, appearing once more. I do not know what you mean by funny business, but I will respect your boundaries, Alex Whitmore. We will share only what you are willing to share. The words felt like a promise, and somehow, for the first time since this whole thing began, Alex believed her. Maybe it was the calm in her voice, or maybe it was the fact that she wasn't pressuring him, wasn't demanding anything. There was an almost gentle energy to her presence, something that made him feel strangely safe despite the alien nature of it all. Alex placed his hand in hers again, and this time he didn't pull back. He could feel her presence, strong, steady, patient. There was no immediate rush this time. He let his mind wander, just a little, enough to catch the quiet hum of Zaira's emotions. A mix of curiosity, loneliness, hope, and something else. A deep, aching sadness that seemed to bleed through, though it was subtle, like a whisper he couldn't quite catch. She was waiting for him to acknowledge it. And he did. "I've been alone, too," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "In ways that are hard to explain." He wasn't sure why he'd said it, maybe because it felt like she understood, or maybe because he was finally starting to realize that he'd been walking around with walls up for most of his life. Zaira's mental voice was gentle, almost tender. "I know, Alex Whitmore. I feel it." The floodgates opened then, just a crack, but it was enough. Alex didn't know how or why, but he felt something stir deep within him, something he'd kept hidden for years. He didn't know if it was the ritual, the alien connection, or simply the act of sharing his vulnerability with another being, but suddenly, his own emotions were swirling inside him, pulling him under. He could see flashes of his own life, the quiet moments, the isolated moments, the ones where he felt most disconnected from the world around him. He had always tried to protect himself, to keep from getting hurt. But the truth was, he'd been isolated, so completely that sometimes he felt like he was a stranger in his own skin. Zaira's voice broke through the fog of his own thoughts. "You do not have to explain it all, Alex. I see it. I feel it." Her presence seemed to envelop him, warm and soothing, like a blanket he hadn't known he needed, and for the first time in a long time, Alex allowed himself to feel, really feel, what it was like to be seen. To be understood. The connection between them deepened, and Alex felt as if he were losing himself in it. He had no words for it, no real understanding of what was happening to him, but it felt like something he couldn't undo. His body felt lighter, as if the weight he'd been carrying, those burdens, those defenses, was slipping away bit by bit, and then, a moment that was both terrifying and comforting arrived. Zaira opened a door within him, his own memories. The painful ones, the tender ones. His first childhood crush. His failed relationships. The moments when he'd felt completely lost, adrift in a world that didn't seem to understand him. The memories flooded him all at once. He saw his life unfold in flashes, his father's disappointment, his mother's silent tears, the loneliness of his adolescence. But there were also the quieter moments, the friends he had loved, the moments of connection that had been so fleeting he'd almost forgotten them. His first real friend in high school, someone who made him believe that there was more to life than just surviving. And with those memories came feelings, raw, unfiltered, uncomfortable feelings that Alex had spent most of his life avoiding. Love, hurt, hope. Zaira's presence was there with him, always steady, always patient. She was not judging him. She was simply with him. And that was enough. When it ended, when the connection finally started to ebb, Alex was left standing there, breathing deeply as if he had just emerged from deep underwater. He looked at Zaira, and for the first time, his words felt inadequate. You made me see things," he said, his voice hoarse. "Things I didn't want to see." "That is the purpose of the ritual," Zaira said quietly. "To see each other as we truly are. Not just as others see us, but as we feel within ourselves." Alex's chest tightened. I didn't know I was carrying all of that. The loneliness. The fear of connection." Zaira nodded, her 3 eyes fixed on him. "It is not easy, Alex. But it is important. Connection requires vulnerability. Without it, there is no true understanding. No way to bridge the gaps between us. Alex swallowed, still reeling. The weight of the ritual, of the feelings he had experienced, was still heavy on him. But in some strange, undefinable way, he felt lighter. More whole. More connected. So, Alex said after a long pause, his voice more steady now, "What now?" Zyra gave him a soft smile, her presence still warm and open. "Now, we both move forward. Our connection does not end here, but it evolves. Just as yours with others will evolve." Alex nodded slowly. "I think I'm starting to understand," he said quietly, and he meant it. The ritual had ended, and Alex was no longer the man who had walked into that room earlier. He wasn't sure what kind of man he was yet, but for the first time in a long time, he didn't mind the uncertainty. He would have to process all of this, figure out what it meant for him, but there was something comforting in the fact that he didn't have to have all the answers right away. As he left the room, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and calm, he couldn't help but think that maybe this intergalactic diplomacy wasn't just about finding common ground with aliens. Maybe it was about finding common ground within himself, and that was the strangest, most unexpected part of all. End.